Roscoe,
Present.
Mrs. Cameron,
Present.
Mr. Kroll, present.
Do the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the via symbol of perfect friendship of our united cultures.
Thank you. Before the approval agenda, do we have any changes?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, we would like to review the presentation on the clarification of college readiness data. Mr. Wyman has a family emergency he's tending to, and his backup is not feeling well this evening.
Any other changes?
That is
Okay. We have a motion to approve the agenda with the changes.
I make that motion.
A second.
Thank you. Mr. Cole, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
and Mr. Kroll, yes.
Okay. On to, public comment.
Mr. President, members of the board, at this time, we do not have anybody signed up for public comment.
On to reports. Donation by First Savings Bank.
Wondered if we could get pictures with the board members, if possible, that is back.
Yes, ma'am. Do that. And the,
You can have your picture posted.
yes. And this is for,
This is for the school cards, that every person that has a school card, for every dollar they spend, we donate.
thank you guys. You guys have done this before, so we appreciate it very much.
Thank you as well.
Where do we go?
Yeah, and Jessica.
Do you want in the back or do you just want in the front here? You'll be here, you can back, so.
We go out and help and what happens. Bring it on, right off. I hope they talk it. I'll bring it out for.
All right, so I'm gonna yours down just a little bit because
Uneven.
it's uneven. No, or you know, you're right there. Okay. Sorry, that was driving me crazy. All right, everybody, big smile. Enchiladas. We love them. All right, thank you guys so much. Thank you guys very much. Yeah, sorry, very good.
Yes, ma'am, you do.
A $3,000 high, huh?
You do that, so they don't say that. All right, thank you for that. On to the next item B. DHS Mesa Team Recognition, Governor's Challenge winners.
What all those shirts are.
Can you take a picture of them too?
Are we gonna go for that too? That's the closest I get to athletics.
Yeah, when they're done, we'll do a picture.
Mr. President and members of the board, I would like to present to you the winners of the New Mexico Governor STEM Challenge. And their project was picked up and selected by Meta, the Facebook company. with, their project, the interactive playgrounds powered by, renewable energy. So I have, some of the members here of the winning team, and they would introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Galarza. My classmates and I have had this amazing opportunity to prove ourselves to people from different districts. We had so much fun meeting people from all around the state and making new and lifelong connections. We thank our community and our teachers for helping us this far, and we promise to keep the high standards that we have set for ourselves.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm doing social media. During this challenge, I got to immerse myself in so many experiences I would have never been able to do if it wasn't for Mesa. And I got to participate and work on a project like ours that I wouldn't have been able to do if it wasn't for my sponsors and everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexia Chavia, and I would just like to thank my school and sponsors for letting me have this great opportunity to better our education and community. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Giselle Reyes. I am very grateful for the opportunity that our school has given us to take us to the Governor's STEM Challenge. I feel like I really got to get myself out there unlike I would now or back then. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it was really fun being able to do this, the Governor's Challenge. And it was a great opportunity that the school gave me, and it helped me a lot with like communication and stuff. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Nathaniel Baron, and I just wanted to say thank you to the school and to my Mesa advisors for giving me this opportunity and letting me really reach out and do something that I'm passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Mr. Belen. I'm one of the Mesa sponsors. These amazing students they did great, and we are targeting state this coming March 18th.
Oh.
So we're putting out one of the projects that we did for the interactive playground, and we're putting it as a Mesa USA project that we are going to be completing on March 18th. Also for the Mesa State competition, which is if we win, we're gonna go nationals for.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
For the project, one of the projects that we have is the automatic watering system, and then with that project, it's actually addressing the problem of the community of Deming, which is somehow they're not aware that we're running out of water, and so that automatic watering system is actually will help us with the utilization of the water in the town of Deming. So
Wow.
hopefully, if we win, we're going to
quite a-
San Diego for nationals. Yeah. And yeah, just for the last one, we have Miss Ramirez. Well, she's our ever loyal chaperone whenever we go on a trip for.
Actually, I want to say something. I think this program has been super outstanding. I've been able to see other after-school programs and the way that these kids manage themselves whenever we go out of state, even the way they behave in all the trips, it is fantastic. Mr. Belen and Mr. Valdez have done amazing job with them. And the project that they've done, I'm pretty sure it can be something that, yes, our community can make benefit of. So good job, guys.
And when do you go to national?
So we're gonna go state on March 17th. The national is gonna be on June, the last week of June. That's going to be Mesa USA.
In June? And then in July, you can bring us your trophy.
Yes. All right, I'd like to get a picture of all you guys with the board. So if you guys will come and get me here in the middle.
No.
Oh, you guys, what was your prize for winning the STEM challenge?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that each of them, the 10 of them will receive $500 each.
Wow. All right, big smile. Thank you guys so much.
Congratulations.
Yes. Really a great job.
Congratulations.
Probably take a shot from Mrs. Cameron.
Shaking of the head.
No, I wouldn't mind. They're great girls.
All right. So. Next item on the agenda is NEA Deming.
Board members, Mr. President, nice to see you guys again. I know we've been. December, we were both sick, unfortunately, at the last minute there. And then in January, you guys were in Columbus and love y'all, but no. So any activities? We've had, you guys had something in December. We had for members. They had a lot of fun. They had a whole bunch of people. You had like almost 100 people show up. Star Max, all spread from Rwanda. They catered it because the kitchen was closed at Star Max. So that was really nice. And then we are still, NEA New Mexico is working on legislative priorities, which include don't make year-round school a thing. We've heard a lot from small schools that talk about how detrimental this is to them that have the 4-day weeks. For instance, I've personally talked to somebody out of Wardsburg who says 4-day weeks, they have all of their parents convinced that anytime they have doctor's appointments, it happens on Fridays. You know, when they send kids to sporting events, it's on Fridays typically, and that's when they have off, which works because if you've got like 100 kids in your school, it hurts when you have 20 of them away for sports and things. And then, of course, there's all the cost for transportation and everything else, so it's working very well for them. So that's a big thing for legislative priority. And then another one is smaller class sizes. I'm sure you guys are aware of seeing smaller class sizes they're very loosey-goosey in the way it's worded legislatively. So it'd be nice if they could tighten that up but it comes with a lot of issues because where are you going to put those extra classrooms if you have to put them in? So that's a big issue. That requires funding. And Ms. Abril Correa, my co-president, and several other, how many people did you take with you? 4 other people went up to New Mexico, to Santa Fe for lobby day to talk to senators and stuff.
Yes, I was able to share a couple words with Senator Lara. She comes from Las Cruces and she agreed. She didn't want the whole year round for her kids too, because she's right, they don't take in consideration our weather. They don't take in consideration that a lot of people have to work, and so she agreed with us, but one of her strongest points is that she also wants to work and help us for smaller classrooms. She says that if she's seen it in some other districts where they are able to have that, and it's been a very successful year for them. So we are trying, and if you will, advocate for us to have a smaller setting.
Good.
And we've also been doing, Abril has been doing school visits. Where was the last? Red Mountain?
Red Mountain and RST.
So continuing with those, spacing them out throughout the year, because to be honest, it's a lot for her and everybody to do. And it's just easier to space them out throughout a whole year instead of trying to cram them in real quick or something. Does you have any questions?
Questions?
Were you able to lobby them to give our salaries?
We tried.
Did-
They are still gonna vote for us on school employees, so cross our fingers that that'll happen. I think the last time I saw it, it said that every budget proposed, there's a 3%, 4%, and 6% raise. So of the 3 budgets being presented, right, or that were presented, every one of them includes a raise for school employees.
That's good.
The lovely thing, and I personally absolutely love this about Miss Vicky Chavez, and I've told her and other people this before, she highly agrees with us that when we get those mandates, even though sometimes it will say that it's an average, that she does across the board raises. And that's the biggest thing for NEA. We don't believe in shorting anybody. And in fact, I've had teachers say, well, give us 1% less and give, all the other school staff a certain amount if you have to do it, to make sure that we do it as equitably as possible.
You know, so we really do advocate for that, just across the board, if at all possible,
Yeah.
broad categories.
Yeah, it really does. My work with the union, you know, it really, does cause some, problems.
Well, it does, and we've even had it in this district where a group of people will get a raise. For instance, people that are at central office get a raise, people who both sides don't and stuff. It just creates a lot of inequities along staff and everybody. But we don't need that. We need togetherness, and it's really good, and teachers always advocate, you know, just give across the board for everybody, if at all possible.
How many members do you currently have?
We are at
198.
Oh,
198, so
And how's that broken out? Is it teachers?
it's all staff.
What kind of numbers, just teacher wise versus everybody else?
It's much heavier on teacher wise, and I'll tell you, and I tell people all the time, my old co-president used to yell at me. It hurts when you look at your paycheck. It's $700 and something a month, not a month, a year for teachers to do. I personally do it, like I pay for house insurance if I don't have to. So I pay for my NEA and, liability insurance, and that way is my way of thinking. But for our EAs and staff, it's still over $300 a year.
That's, you're talking about dues?
Yes,
Oh, okay. So over $300 a month?
a year.
Oh, a year.
It's a year, so it's not, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but at the same time, when you're talking about some EAs who are of limited funds and stuff, it's a chunk. I mean, even for myself, but as a teacher, it's a chunk of money every month that comes out that, you know, I try not to think about.
yeah, it's divided into 12 months and,
Yeah, it is.
but still, I understand that.
So there is payroll deduct, so it's less hurtful and you don't have to, like I said, think about it as much. But because of that, we tend to have much less membership among, classified employees, employees that are paid hourly. Just because for them, many of them don't see the need for it, or they don't want to invest in it.
And we are now getting more subs into the union too. We are able to be our members.
Now, I also say for classified staff, one of the things that's great about Ms. Perea is that she, is a classified employee. She does see the value in it, and so she's able to communicate that. Myself, when I go to talk to classified employees, they're like, yeah, you make the big bucks. I don't want to hear it. Do you know what I mean? And so she's able to give them a very different perspective about why they should join and what we can provide to them versus what I can do. And so I will fully admit that for myself, in my years of recruitment, I haven't recruited as many, classified staff.
And not to mention that it's not a bilingual.
Yeah, not speaking
Just
Spanish
throwing it out there.
is a definite detriment to some of our employees who are very heavy Spanish speakers. I can't even ask, do you want to join? Or explain what the union is, and that's definitely a detriment.
It sounds like you have a good working relationship there.
And we do pretty well. We kind of divide, instead of doing everything together, she does this, I do that, and it all works.
Either way, it's grown, hasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have grown, especially with, Abril doing the school visits and being able to talk Spanish and all that stuff is definitely.
Because a few years back, the membership wasn't.
I think my lowest was like 117, 120. And that was like 3 years ago. So, yeah, you've definitely grown.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move on to approval of the consent agenda. Have
Also move approval.
a second.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Cole, can you take a roll, please? Yes, sir.
Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco.
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
On to action items.
Mr. President, members of the board, tonight we are joined by the Jaramillo Group, which consists of Scott Eliason and Audrey Jaramillo.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. President and members of the board. And I think there are some joining us online,
Yes.
Leslie and Joe, maybe.
Yes.
And so I'll just introduce myself and then turn it over to my partner, Audrey Jaramillo. Good to see you guys. I met some of you at the conference last week, and we have another presentation at the conference tomorrow in Maslow. So it's been a very busy time. It was good to be here. Very good and great to serve the district again. We were out here many years ago for the forensic work and now on your external audit. And so really appreciate your team members here. Had a great experience again. And I'm gonna let Scott Eliza, my partner, jump into the details. I think we do have, I'm sorry, what? Yeah, sure. If you get to.
All right.
And then I think they got the PowerPoint.
So we're here to talk about the results of the audit, and the state audit rule requires that the auditors meet with governance after the audit report is released. And so it was released a few weeks back, and we just have a short PowerPoint presentation to go over our required communication. We also have the financial statements here. We can go over all 103 pages. So we have, if anybody has any questions, we'll talk about that at the completion. So I'll just let you go ahead and roll through the slides. And this is the required communication. So
May I ask a question? Is this just on Cesar Chavez?
No, this is, if you go back a slide, maybe I can talk a little bit about this. So the audit itself is the audit of Deming Public Schools, and because Cesar Chavez is administratively attached, we also do their audit.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I see.
And so their audit information is in your report.
Mhm.
In addition, they get a separate report that is released. So the scope of the audit, which is on the next slide, I believe. The scope of the audit itself, it really covers 4 pieces. And the first piece that says FS, that's the financial statement audit piece. We do that piece after the books are closed out and the trial balances and the PPCs are all uploaded, the PPCs being the prepared by client schedules. And the second piece of the audit is the UGG audit. That's the audit under the Uniform Grant Guidance. And that audit covers the federal programs that we audit. And we'll talk a little bit about that a bit later here. And then we see the one that says component unit, because the fact that Cesar Chavez, that charter school is administratively attached, the state audit rule says the auditor also has to audit that, and it's called the component unit. So that is also part of our audit. And then the last piece is what it says up there, it says OSA. That's the Office of the State Auditor. They issue a state audit rule, and we as the auditors have to go through the state audit rule and look at how it applies to the district. And we then will test certain compliance requirements. One of them being the School Personnel Act. We do test and look at various items under that piece of the rule. Also things like procurement. Is the district appropriately making the payments of the active members to RHCA and to ERB? There's a whole number of different tests that we do. Any of which, if there was a failure by the district or the charter school, we are required to report finding in the report. Next slide. And so we, as the auditors, we take a risk-based approach to the audit, and that's what pretty much all auditors, they take a risk-based approach, because you can't look at every single thing. To do so means we'd have to be here on site with the team, looking at every single transaction. So we do a lot of sampling, scoping, confirming balances, for example, with the bank. We do a lot of tests that, based on risks, what we think is the risk of the entity, and plan our test accordingly. We look at the internal control structure, that's the controls. We do spend time with all the major transaction cycles of the district, cash receipts, activity funds, for example, disbursements, all the operating disbursements, payroll. So we're pulling samples of all those things, walking through the transaction cycles. And then we have what's called the GAV fees. We as auditors have lots of acronyms. The GAV fees being, the government auditing, or the government accounting standards board. They have, well, actually, we're up to like 101 or 102 pronouncements at this point, some of which apply to the district. And that's what's used to sort of create the financial statements and the disclosures in the financial statements, the government auditing or accounting standards. And we also apply government auditing standards. So that kind of covers our approach there at a really high level. Go ahead. And so the timing of the audit, you can see up there that we worked on different pieces of the audit at different times. I would say that we followed our original plan. There was no major changes to the approach or planning. We finished up, delivered the financial statements before the November 15th deadline. You can see up there, it says UGG testing. So we did look at 3 of the major federal programs, looked at how did the district comply with the compliance requirements of the program. Did they have the appropriate internal control structure? You can see the 3 federal programs, the Education Stabilization Fund, that's the ESSER funds, also Title I and IDEA-B were all part of this selection process. And so we as auditors, based on different criteria, federal programs that are audited move in and out. For example, we don't see the child nutrition cluster up there. That one is one that we didn't look at, but it's a large program. Next slide. We're required to report to the board that we are independent of the district. Next slide. And so in this audit report, this 100 and some page audit report, includes the independent auditor's report, in opinion that's up front. That covers a couple of pages. I think the key takeaway here is that you have an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statement audit itself. And also a couple of takeaways. Management is responsible for designing an effective internal control structure, ensuring that they have an appropriate structure to ensure that all the compliance requirements are followed. So grants have lots of compliance requirements. Of course, the state audit rule has lots of compliance requirements that we test. The district has to have all those maintained in place. The second piece up there is the report on each major federal program. So in these financial statements, towards the back, there's a couple of page opinion on the compliance of the federal program. You do have an unmodified clean opinion on the federal programs. And then lastly, there's a report under generally accepted government auditing standards. And if there were any findings, those would be included in the report. Next slide. Oh, this is the slide that everybody wants to see, right? We could probably just stop right here. Everybody wants to know about findings. We did not have any findings related to the district. There were none in the prior year under the previous audit firm, and none in the current year under our work and our testing. The administratively attached Cesar Chavez did have one audit finding. It's required to be included in your report under the state audit rule, so we do include that one finding related to Cesar Chavez. And that finding relates to segregation of duties. One person, the business manager, was essentially doing everything. And as you know, you want to have appropriate segregation of duties. Somebody different, approving versus somebody posting transactions. So that was our comment on that. They agreed. That's in the report. But we're talking about the district here tonight, and that's very good to see that. No findings. Next slide. Just a couple of slides here on communication with the governing body. Items to be communicated here. Anything that the selection of the policies, that's really up to the district. We look at it and we say that the policies are appropriate, and the next slide says that. the management has selected the appropriate accounting policies. And then the next item has to do with estimates. We're required to talk about any accounting estimates and any judgments. Oh, back a slide. Go too fast. There we go. So, couple of estimates in the financial statements, like the capital assets, the district picks a life, and then that's sort of the estimated life that gets, depreciated over that useful life. The ERB and the OPEB, the RHCA, which is OPEB, there's some liabilities in the financial statements that are rather large. And that is because on the full accrual statements up front, and that's because the district, under the accounting standard, is required to pick up their prorated portion of the unfunded liability. And as Mary Lou knows, ERB is underfunded. And I know every year they work on trying to get that funded a little better. And so that is an estimate in the financial statements. Those plans, including also para, which is for the state, others like the city and the county, those are underfunded too. So that's just a situation that New Mexico has to continue to work on every year, is trying to get those plans funded better, because they've made a promise, right? Teachers, for example, and they're underfunded, and they just need to continue to work on getting those funded better.
Yeah.
The next slide. Any difficulties? If there were any difficulties, we'd be required to talk about those. There was no difficulties during the audit. Next slide. You didn't think accountants could be this creative, did you? So audit adjustments, if there were any audit adjustments or any adjustments that we knew needed to be recorded, but were not recorded because they were passed on, because they were less than being material but still significant, we'd be required to report that. There were no corrected misstatements in the financial statements. So what that means is that the district, when they prepare the numbers for us, I think that they've done a good job. And so we didn't have to correct any, and we're not aware of any uncorrected misstatements. Any disagreements? If there were any disagreements, we'd have to tell the board, and there were no disagreements. And we were also required, if the district consulted with other accountants, we'd have to talk about that, but we're not aware of any communication with any other audit firms. And Audrey's going to talk just briefly about this one.
I am?
Yep, you are.
Okay, yeah, I'll come a little closer so that I can read it. So in our presentation at the School Boards Association last week, they wanted a student focus, and so I thought, well, why don't we talk a little bit about where student funds go? Where does the money of the district go? We hear of all these billions of dollars that come to public education, so how is that all broken out? And so in that training, we went over how to look up in these financial statements, where the money is going. But also I put together a chart that showed by percentage and then the dollar amounts for Deming specifically where the funds go. So you always hear, of course, instruction. That's a big portion of the budget, but you have also other areas that you choose to spend money on, such as how much you put into admin, central services, I guess O&M, operations and maintenance of plant, that's kind of, you gotta keep up with things, right? So that's not real optional. Transportation, food services, those can depend a lot on if you in-source or you have it in-house or outsource, and how efficient your contractor is or how efficient your district is. So those numbers and percentages can change a little bit. Capital outlay, that's, obviously what you're spending on anything over $5,000 that goes into the category of capital outlay and becomes a capital asset to then be depreciated. And then you have debt. So I think you have about 28.5 million in debt, if I remember correctly. And these are your principal and interest payments. And if you had issued bonds, you would have issuance costs of issuing bonds as well. And so just remember, every tranche of bonds that you put out there, the bond attorneys will get paid. And so that is an extra cost to the district. But overall, I think you're pretty much in line with other districts. I didn't look at a lot of districts, but I think that the district here is about 19,000 a year per student. And that includes all of the expenditures here. So you take $19,000 per student times however many students you have in your classroom. You know, you can get like a classroom based, how much money you're spending per classroom. But of course, you have to take into account that it includes other things than just instruction. It includes, you know, all the overhead, transportation, food, and then debt as well. So, but another point to think of is that there are different revenue streams, right? So you all know as board members that transportation has its own category and funding. Grants have their own revenues coming in that you can spend. And even your GO bonds and debt that you go out for, you have revenue coming in from the community and property taxes that are assigned revenue source to pay for that debt as well. So it's all kind of relative to the revenue flows that are coming into the district and then how it's spent. But this is the expenditure side for fiscal year 23. So you all are in charge and responsible for a very large multi-million-dollar entity. Does that feel good? Sometimes it doesn't, I know, because I served on my local board for 8 years, so I know exactly how it is. It's a big responsibility, and you see this and you go, wow, we really do spend a lot of money on public education. And sometimes, yeah, it still seems like more is needed, right? So that's what I had on the numbers. And I think we wanted to ask if you had any questions on the financial statements themselves.
No, I just wonder if you put us in jail by putting the screen over the Charlie Wildcat.
That's our creative side. That's not actually about
Oh.
creative guy.
Oh, yeah, I guess you could interpret that as like a honeycomb or a fence or a.
No, I just.
What else do we need to go over?
I don't think so. I mean, if we were just going to say, hey, we've only got 30 seconds to talk about the audit, that'd be really hard for us to do, but we would go to page 107 in the audit report, and it's a one-page summary of the results of the audit. So page 107 covers the one-page summary, and I'll just reemphasize this before we finish here, that the financial statements is an unmodified or clean opinion, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and no non-compliance material to the financial statements for the district. The charter also got an unmodified or clean opinion. They did have one significant deficiency related to the segregation of duties issues we spoke of. And then the federal awards, that also had unmodified or clean opinion, no deficiencies. And that sort of covers the results of the audit. If we just had 25 seconds to talk about it.
Thanks again to the team. I know I mentioned it earlier, but Leslie, Joe, everybody was great to work with.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. Just a comment, Leslie and her team, awesome, because it's extremely difficult to go back-to-back years without having a finding of some sort. And so, kudos to her and her team for putting in the work and the time and the effort and everything like that. Mrs. Doyle, do you have anything?
I do, actually. Thank you very much. I appreciate that both from Audrey and Scott, but also you, Mr. President. I much appreciate the the vote of confidence, I do just want to say that this is not something that I do on my own, that I have a pretty awesome team behind me that holds the line on a lot of things, and just say kudos to them as well. And that's all I'd like to say, is that I don't do this in isolation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Questions?
No, I know that we're, all of us, relieved that usually our findings are very small. I think it's been a long time since we've had something that was really major. And
It definitely does ease our mind a little bit, like you said.
yeah. Which means that everyone's working together to make sure.
Thank you, Leslie.
And they really have to hold the line on things, like Leslie said, and sometimes it's not fun to be the bad guy in finance, but otherwise run into problems, so. And then us coming in with fresh eyes and some of us, have other certifications, like certified fraud examiner or other things, and so we're not the easiest firm to go with, but yeah, we were impressed that, first year, new set of eyes and no findings again, so that's really great.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And thank you, Leslie. I think we should thank her.
Any other comments? If none, then I'll entertain a motion for consideration and approval of the FY 23 financial statements from Automobile Accounting Group.
So move.
Motion and a second. Mr. Cole, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
That on to consideration and approval of budget adjustment requests. Mrs. Doyle?
Yes, good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Excuse me. You do have some budget adjustments before you. Number 12 is for our ARP funding. This is to move salary and benefits to the appropriate lines. ARP is funding that is used for, to mostly support the students, and that is kind of fluid as we find that we need something here or something there, and so budgeting for it is not always easy. So what I'm doing here is that I'm bringing the budget in line to the additional support that we have provided our students. Number 13 for our NM pre-K program, this is for washer, a washer and dryer, and then also covering any of those negative salary balances. Number 14 is to cover salary and benefits for our Title I program. Number 15 is just a small budget to move money to purchase for furniture for a assistant principal at one of our school sites. Number 16 is a supply chain award. This is an award that we've actually gotten, I believe, since 2020 for COVID. This is a supply chain award that kind of helps for our student nutrition as it relates to any supply chain issues they might have. Then we do have number 17. This is our Title II carryover allocation. This is the time of year, although I would appreciate it much earlier on, but the time of year that we do, begin to get our carryover allocations. This is probably the first of many that you will see. And then finally, we got our rural and income schools allocation for the fiscal year 23 year. Interesting that we got it in February for 23, but we did get it and we will utilize it appropriately. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Why does a carryover happen so late?
Good question. Because the issue with it specifically as it relates to something this large is that we get it and we have to have it encumbered by 6/30 and then spent by September 30th, which, of course, I'm thankful for the funds, but if we really want to utilize them in the best interest of our kids, we'd like to get them earlier in the year so that we can use those funds to support, throughout the year and not just the last couple months of the school year.
Any other questions? Concerns, comments? Okay. If not, I'll entertain a motion for consideration and approval of budget adjustment requests.
Also move.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Mr. Crowe, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Doyle.
Thank you.
On to consideration and approval of grant agreement, New Mexico School Kitchen Infrastructure Improvement. Secretary.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. I am very excited to come back and tell you that we were awarded the full amount for the grant that we put in for the kitchen infrastructure project. So we were awarded $367,561.49.
Wow.
And we're able to use that to plan, design, construct, renovate, furnish, and equip our public school kitchens for any infrastructure improvements. This does have a reversion date of June 30th, 2027, and I think that's more than adequate time for us to purchase equipment and anything else that we may need for the replacement at the different school sites. And I'll stand for any questions you may have about the grant agreement.
I have one when I read this earlier, Mr. President. It's not for building something from scratch, right? It's
No.
completely from,
So, when you're doing equipment changes out in, a kitchen, there may be a gas line that we need to take care of, or a water line or anything like that. And so if there are some, construction costs associated with that, it can be billed to this grant.
okay.
As far as I understand, it's not for the central kitchen. Am I right?
We
It's for-
did include central kitchen in the grant application in case we needed it. We kept it really broad and had quite a few schools included in it so that we wouldn't be tied down on how we use the funding, because at the time that we applied, we were kind of up in the air about central. So it can be used for central, but we also, when we did the application, we targeted, Central Cafeteria, Baton Elementary, RST, Columbus, Deming Intermediate, and Red Mountain Middle Schools. So those were the kitchens that we targeted for this funding.
The other ones are, the fairly new schools.
They're, exactly, it's fairly new kitchens and they weren't in need of that, any replacements or upgrades.
But Bell doesn't have a kitchen, does it?
No, it's done out of a central location. So it's, a hub school, so.
Any other questions, concerns,
No.
comments?
I think that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consideration and approval of grant agreement, New Mexico School Kitchen Infrastructure Improvement.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Mr. Crowe, would you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That, moving on to item D, consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor Four Rivers Incorporated for Hoffacket Courtyard Project and Members Valley High School.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
Mr. President, members of the board, you have before you a quote from Four Rivers, a local contractor, to do some nice upgrades at the Hoffacket Courtyard. The superintendent tasked me with creating a warm and inviting space where we could have outdoor teaching as well as extracurricular events. And the plan is I already got rid of all the dead plants and trees and weeds. I'd like to install some AstroTurf in strategic places for kids to lounge on.
And additionally, add some crusher fines and repair the irrigation, move the irrigation to the proper distance from the trees that we are saving, and create a planting area and repair that pump house.
I want to go over there and just sit.
You will. Yes, have a cup of tea up there.
Okay.
Are there any shades that are gonna be constructed there?
No, we did not have enough money in the budget for that yet, and the kids do like to play some basketball out there.
Oh.
And I could just see the shade getting full of basketballs.
Okay.
So, and it's sort of enclosed, so I don't know that they really need shade.
Right, guys, so all of our member family.
Is there still shade there though? Well, there's the gazebo type thing. It's still there.
So there is.
Yeah, there is a shade. And you can see that centrally located on the slide that shows the courtyard, but it's been there since they built it. So you can kind of see Charles.
It disappeared.
It's gone.
Give me a minute.
Disappeared on us.
Well, it's
Now it's all disappeared.
It's lost forever.
Yeah.
Let's get one open at the bottom. It looks like.
there.
Oh, there you go.
See that in the center, you can see the roof.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can see kind of the amphitheater style seating.
Uh-huh.
And behind that are three great big planters that just get full of weeds and dirt and trash. And so I want to put some crusher pines in the lower one and some nice astroturf in the upper ones. And it'll just make it a much more user-friendly space and to mirror the high school's courtyard. That's very nice. It's time we got something done with that space.
Comments, questions? Good. I'll entertain a motion for consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor for Rivers Incorporated for whole back courtyard project in Rivers Valley High School.
Also move.
Second,
Second.
motion in a second, Mr. Crowe, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Crowe, yes.
Carries, thank you.
Thank you.
On to item E, consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor Lone Mountain Contracting Incorporated for track basement and structural spray. And Mrs. Babs.
All right. Mr. President, members of the board, you have before you a proposal for Lone Mountain Contracting to tear out and replace the track at the Memorial Stadium. The existing track is about 7.5 years old. It's had considerable wear and tear and it's time. We did a crack repair last year. We did get a quote for a lot less than this, just to rip out parts and patch them, you know, piece by piece. But Lone Mountain on that quote did advise that that would be the very last time we could do that. And so we decided to move forward with getting quotes and getting this done. It's gonna take a lot of coordination with facilities because they wanna plant, they wanna receive the football field. But we're really good at working together as a team and get this done.
I have a question. What's a track base mat?
I've got some, to put it in layman's terms, they rip out all of the rubber. We'll inspect the asphalt that's underneath, because if the asphalt that's underneath is trashed, we're gonna have to address that. And then the base mat is, think of it as like carpet, but it's really hard vulcanized rubber. And that goes in first, and they install that in first and weld the seams, like with torches instead of sewing it. And then they spray on the polyurethane coating on top of that, which is the red color, and then they stripe it. So the base mat is the bottom layer, Then there's another layer on top.
Thank you.
How long will this project take?
We think 4 weeks, 4 to 5, depending on the condition of the asphalt.
What's the projected timeline? When are you projected to start?
Tomorrow?
Well, as soon as I can get them a purchase order. Well, we can't mobilize, they can order the product as soon as they have the PO, so they're ready to go.
Is it gonna
We can't
affect?
start until after graduation.
And that was my next question. Is it gonna interfere with graduation?
No, we have to start after graduation,
Oh,
and then we have to finish by the first scrimmage, which is August 1st.
okay.
But that's plenty.
So what is the, usual life of,
About 7 years, 5 to 7 years, if you really baby them. I mean, they could go for a really long time, UV rays and watering on them, and then if you drive your gators on them and turn your wheels, that tears them up the most. So if we don't do that, we keep the water off of it and keep it clean, it should last at least 7 years, probably 10.
is the sun a big issue with that or? Yes,
Nothing lasts as long as.
that's right.
Any other questions? I've got all the product specs, the warranty information, if anybody wants to see that, or I can shoot them an email tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, entertain a motion for consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor Lone Mountain Contracting Incorporated for track basement and structural spray.
Also
Basement,
move.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I so move the approval.
Have a second.
I'll second that.
Motion in a second. Mr. Kroll, can you take roll, please?
Yes, Mrs. Crumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yeah.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Crow, yes.
With that, on to consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor J3 Systems for Fieldhouse re-roof.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, this proposal is for the old field house. When we designed to create the addition, the new addition, we did look at, and we did perform replacing the skylights in the old field house and doing some patching around the new HVAC units that were placed up there. And that is all the money we had to do in the budget. But it is leaking. And so I got several quotes. I had J3 Systems come out and look. They're my favorite roofing contractor because they'll come out anytime, help us patch and repair, pro bono, get me quotes anytime I ask, even if I aren't gonna be able to hire someone in 3 or 4 years. They did this roof, they did cement, and they did the auditorium. And they just do good work and they have a lot of integrity. I appreciate
What
it.
was the last one? I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
The last-
Auditorium?
Auditorium, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are we doing the entire roof also? We're gonna do the new part also?
No,
So this is just the old
this
part?
is just addressing that old roof.
And I'm gonna make a suggestion. When we do additions like that, to make sure that we include what needs to be done, so we don't have to come back because it doesn't look good. They're here, we just built a brand new building right up against it, and then we left the other one alone. We just patched it or whatever we did. Instead of just doing it right the first time and then not have to deal with this later on. I'm almost certain that's probably a lot cheaper back then, was it, when we were doing it, if we would have done it at the beginning, right?
To do the whole thing?
To do the whole thing at one time?
I don't know. Because it's so distinct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I understand that, but
And we had to stay in that, occupy that building, but I agree, we should have included it in.
I mean, we should have just done it right,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm gonna propose, that from now on, we don't skimp on it, we don't try to make budgets fit. We do it right the first time and then not have to worry about it for a long time. I'm not blaming you by any stretch of
Oh, no,
imagination,
no.
I just wanna
But I
make sure that we get that very clearly. Cause I'm not gonna approve stuff if it's not done right anymore, I'm just not, cause of things like this. When we did the lights, we had to pay an extra $1 million or whatever it was, and for around the facilities and stuff, so or we could have done it right at the beginning and then been done with it. And so I would really love to know what the difference in the cost was if we would have done it back then versus now. I mean, I'm pretty sure we would save at least $20,000 or $30,000. And so from now on, let's try to see if we can nip it in the bud and try to do it right the first time and then not have to worry
Parks
about it.
Department will make a note to try to.
Not do piecemeal.
Piecemeal, it needs to just do it right and be done with it.
We will make every effort to encapsulate all
Yeah.
of the work.
I mean, because it doesn't, I mean, we just built that brand new building, that's the thing, you know? And the new building is not leaking, huh?
Mr. President, Mr. Kroll, if I could, if you got, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
So originally, when we started the field house, we did talk about it, and we did not find any issues with leaks in the old field house. The reason for some of the leaks that we've noticed now, as you can tell, before the old field house was renovated, it did not have any lay-in ceiling in it. So if there was any leaks, either they evaporated before anybody noticed them or anybody saw them. The other issue that we ran into, because we were on such a tight budget, is that there were things that we were concerned that we weren't even going to be able to renovate the old field house because of the budget. But I agree with you. It's totally our belief that we look at things and look at it in the total picture and not try to come back and throw money at it again. And I totally agree with you. But there was no concern with the roof at that point, and none that was brought to us at the construction office. We noticed those after the fact, after the lay-in ceiling was there, and they weren't substantial leaks, but there were some leaks that we had to address, and they were more noticeable now because of the lay-in ceiling. But I totally agree with you, and trust me that is our belief, that we do it right once and measure twice and cut once, right? Yes, sir.
That's it. No, and of course, I'm not blaming nobody. Things happen, but try to incorporate that, because if you're gonna do the new, you might as well done the roof, you might have done everything. I know we're trying to pinch pennies and do this, but we don't have the money. Let's not do it. Let's save the money for the following year and then do it right, and then we're done.
Makes our life easier.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I do have material data sheets and processes if you're interested in seeing how.
I'm sure that you just mentioned that gentleman or that company is really outstanding and very
And it'll be
forthright.
the Carlisle roofing system with a 20-year warranty.
Wow.
Oh,
So
20-year warranty?
Yes, so anything else arises, they'll just run right on down and address it for us.
Well, that's a good.
So, Mr. President, Mr. Cole, members of the board, so yes, as Ms. Stoffer mentioned, the roof we're gonna fill in the flutes, the R-panel flutes, we're gonna fill those in. They're gonna put a recovery board on it and a 60 mil TPO. And then they'll put drip edges around everything and seal off everything. So yes, and plus the 20-year warranty, so it's a very, very nice finish to it. So none of us should have to do anything with it for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. None, I'll entertain a motion for consideration and approval of quote from CES contractor J3 Systems for Fieldhouse re-roof.
Also move.
Second.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Kroll, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Tremlay,
Yes.
Mrs. Paez,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron,
Yes.
Mr. Kroll, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
On to superintendent's reports.
Mr. President, members of the board, Superintendent Chavez is not feeling well. So she's not here today, but we do need to do a first read of our policies. Last week, we did a work session that was focused on transportation. So that's what these policies are focused on. A lot of the focus last week in the discussion was regarding the disciplinary plan. And in these policies, it is under the EEA student transportation. It is stated that there's this 3 strikes and you're out rule. I know that was important. And then as far as the eligibility for transportation and walkers and riders, that is just kind of set out by state guidance. Special education, as we all know, is kind of guided by law. And then our open enrollment talks about how our students can come into our district to be served by our teachers. But with that, we did put them in your packet, and I stand for any questions regarding any of the policy of these policies.
Questions on those?
And if I may, what we're doing is now the district, as we've been talking about for a few months now, we're starting to work with the New Mexico School Boards Association so that we can start getting all of our program or all of our policies under the guidance of NMSBA, and as legal challenges to the law change policy and the way they direct the way districts move, and as NMSBA starts to manage those for us, they start to change them on our websites for us. And then they issue us updates, and so we can keep on top of the new laws as they come out. So this is the first of many first reads. We hope to have the entire manual adopted by July 1. And that'll be in the announcements later as well. But as we move forward, we'll start doing these work sessions, and we'll be looking at the different chunks. I did send you in an email what those dates are, what sections, and I'll start sending out those sections to you piece by piece. I do stand for any questions about the process if you have any.
I have one question. Is there any platform or mode available for input by anybody else other than us, like the community, the staff, parents, that sort of thing?
Mr. President, members of the board, Mrs. Crumley, what the superintendent and I have decided we're going to do is I'm going to upload those to the website and then include my email address and the superintendent so that we can get feedback. We're also working with our administration team so they can start giving the feedback from like the sites and the departments.
And then last week during the work session, we did get quite a bit of feedback from the contractors and from bus drivers. So that was really informative, and yeah, I think it really helped that we received their input. So,
Mr. President, Mrs. Pyatt, members of the board, any of those feedback items that you'd like to give to the superintendent, I would suggest giving them to Mr. Orozco, and he can communicate those with the superintendent. She's trying to get a meeting with bus contractors. It was supposed to be yesterday, but unfortunately she fell ill. So we have time to give her some of that information as well.
Mr. President, members of the board, this is Fred Parker here. Just a quick update, a couple of points. Our contractors do have copies of the proposed policy for them to look at and make recommendations, and then work, of course, with our director, Mr. Treviso, on different components of that. And so we're looking forward to that input. One of the other things I want to draw your attention to that I actually really appreciate about this policy is while it outlines the original policy, if you give some attention to there's a section that is broken out as regulation, and the regulation is really important because that is where the devil's in the details, right? It talks about, for example, we'll talk about the student responsibilities, parent responsibilities. It breaks down specific things on conduct of the bus, conduct of any riders, conduct of the drivers. So there are pieces of that. I will be making some suggestions and forwarding those over to Mr. Turner as well, and so is Mr. Treviso, about how we can clear that up so it aligns with the intent of the board on clarifying any of those pieces and hoping to address any kinds of misunderstandings that we've had with some of the vagueness that we've had on other pieces as well. So that is a good component of that is as you go through it, there is even within that an exhibit for the student transportation, a school bus incident report that we'll be trying to modify and add to your packet for the second read. And if we need to, possibly a third read as we go through. It does break down even as you go through EEAA, the eligibility for bus transportation, walkers and riders, transportation zones. So please, if you can take a look at those as well when we go there. There were some specific questions at the last work session last week on special education, student transportation. That is definitely addressed in there as well, and how we do have to comply with some of the federal laws regarding that. So there are some other pieces that are there. This does align with just about 95% of our other practices that we currently have in our transportation handbook that could be updated. But even some of the safety pieces that are outlined in that, we do have that. And then, of course, like the regulation goes along that, you know, how we're going to handle medical emergencies, tornadoes, things like that. Mrs. Treviso did a wonderful job laying that out and how she's worked with multiple agencies. And this just kind of works to put it all down in paper with a new updated policy. So I just wanted to take a moment to bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Mr. President, members of the board, and I would like to also point out that the work sessions are also open meetings. So we would invite the public to come with any comments, and of course, our policies, proposed policies would be on the website for them to read prior to. But it would be similar to the last work session where we can get that input from the community on what we're doing. So we are encouraging a lot of community involvement, staff involvement, administrative involvement through this process.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay. Move on to announcements. Board member requests for any agenda items? No, at this point?
I would like to add one. If there's-
Yes, ma'am.
I do want to have some sort of a discussion or status update on advisory school councils at the next meeting.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, if not, there'll be a board work session March 7th, 2024 at 5:30 in the Shockley Administration Building here in Deming. Purpose of the work session is for the board to discuss policies for the Mexico School Boards Association that the district will be adopting for the upcoming school year.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
We won't be making, this will just be the work session part, right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. The next regular meeting of the board will be March 21st, 2024 at 6 p.m. It'll also be at the Emmett Shockley Administration Building. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
I'll second.
Mr. Cole, can you take roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Crumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Paez.
Yeah.
Mr. Orozco.
Yes.
Mrs. Cameron.
I need to think about it. Yes.
Mr. Clay.